21, 22, 23, 24. Yes, you heard right. 24 books I just bought. Was it a bargain or could I have done better? I'll let you decide. Hey everybody, what's going on? Back with a new video. It's been a minute since I've done a book haul, but I am back with a new book haul video. It is my biggest book haul yet. I've only done 2 videos, this is being my 3rd video, but we are going to dive into the mammoth collection of books that I've received yesterday and bought. But I went with a friend yesterday. We went to 2 different places, one being a used bookstore, and 2 was this kind of like annual thing that my area does where they bring in all these used books. It's basically like a flea market for books. Like I said, 24 books I bought yesterday, and with buying those 24 books I only spent just under $100. I think it was either $98 or $99 together, so I don't think I could got any better bargain than that. Yesterday was a pretty successful day, but enough of me blabbing. Let's jump right into the books. First, I'm going to be discussing the first place we went to, a used bookstore. I'm going to be talking about 7 books, with actually it really being 6 books I bought at this store, and I'll get to what I mean in a second. But these books are a great collection to add to my shelf. I actually just ordered a new bookshelf off Amazon, and it's going to go right in this section right here, so I'm excited for that. Now the first book I'm going to talk about is actually the one I mentioned where I got this book at this used bookstore, and then I got the same book actually in hardcover at the second place that we went to, and that is my favorite book by Dean Koontz, The House of Thunder. So I got the paperback at the first store I got, but then just randomly searching at the second place, where again it was like a big old flea market full of books, I actually found the hardcover, surprisingly or not, and I was pretty shocked to find this because I've been wanting to get this book in hardcover. This is my favorite book by Dean Koontz. I have a Dean Koontz video on my channel. If you have not checked it out, go ahead and check it out. I will be diving into more about Dean Koontz because this isn't the only Dean Koontz book I found in the collection, so I'm very excited. Next on my list is actually a book that I have not read, but it's on my TBR list. I have recently just saw the movie. It's starring Tom Hanks. The movie is actually a different title than the book, but the book I had to pick up because I really wanted to read it, and that is Frederick Bachman's A Man Called Ove. Again, I seen the movie with Tom Hanks. It is called A Man Named Otto. It was a really heartwarming and a really touching movie, and so I really wanted to get into reading this book too because I heard really good reviews about it. I will say it won't be too long before I get to this, but maybe I'll move it up on my TBR list. Alright everyone, these next 4 books from this store is, again, if you know me, you know who I love. My favorite author, of course, Stephen King, and all 4 of these are from Stephen King because this is my only second time going to this used bookstore, and they have this own section just for Stephen King, and I find some really great books in hardcovers that are in great condition or in good condition. Again, if you have not checked out my Stephen King tier list, it is my most watched and my most favorite video. Please go ahead and check that out. I will always dive in deeper talking about all the books I've read, which again, this is all the books I've read by Stephen King. And again, I'm going to be reading Holly once it comes out in September, but again, check that out if you have not. I'm just going to talk briefly about these books. The first one I found, it was actually in probably the best condition, and that is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. And this hardcover was again in really good condition all the way through. I didn't find any like scuff marks on it or anything. It's a good solid hardcover book. And again, with people, giving their Stephen King books away, I mean, maybe they just, fall in love with him, but like I'm a collector, and again, I want to get as many as I can, be in hardcovers, and this is a great one to add to the collection. Also, it's a really good story, really quick one. The next Stephen King book on my list to add to my collection is a really great one. I love the movie adaptation of that, and I also have my top 5 movie adaptations by Stephen King. Check that video out as well, and this one is Hearts in Atlantis. Again, another copy I found in really good condition, even great condition, by whoever standards are you're looking at. But this is such a great book. I love this cover too because again, Stephen King does some types of covers where they are like matching covers, and I'm going to show you another book too I got from this book haul. But again, when you match, the covers are really nice. But again, I put my books in alphabetical order, so they're not always going to be right next to the matching covers, but again, that's just me. Again, remember, check out my Stephen King tier list. It is a great one to get any recommendations. I've even time-stamped all the books too, so you can try to find your favorite Stephen King books in there. Alright, the next Stephen King book, it's a chunker, and it is Stephen King's Desperation, which I really enjoyed this one over The Regulators, which The Regulators was written under his pseudonym Richard Bachman. But again, this book and The Regulators, if you have not known, a lot of Stephen King fans know this, if you get these two books and then you put the covers together, it makes one big matching cover, and it's really cool. So I really need to get The Regulators, but again, Desperation, in my opinion, was better than The Regulators. But I'm glad to add this to my collection. Another great book in great supreme condition. So another chunker, but another one to add to the bookshelf. Alright, the last Stephen King book from this first used bookstore is one that, again, I talked about the matching covers and the matching spines, but this one is Dolores Claiborne. The matching spines like this, I have Gerald's Game on my shelf. Again, they have the matching spines that go with each other, but again, Dolores Claiborne was a really good book, a really intense psychological thriller all the way through. Again, all these books I've gotten from this used bookstore are in great condition. They're all hardcovers for the Stephen King. Another Stephen King book to add to the collection, and again, I'm just whittling away off my list of Stephen King books to buy. Alright, now I'm moving on to the second stack of my books. I have 17 in this stack, so this is where the majority I found my books on the book haul. Again, this was like a used book flea market where I went with my friend, and there was tons of people in there. It was in the small ice rink where we actually were in the ice rink where obviously we're not on the ice, but the books were scattered, tables were all along, books were actually laid down with their spines up, so you had to go all the way through, and they were double stacked, so you had to kind of go through and look underneath the stacks and look underneath, because some of the books I'm going to talk about were ones I found buried. Some of these books are diamonds in the rough, if you know what I mean. Alright, the first two books I'm going to talk about I actually bought because of my interest. I've never read them, but the cover interests me, and I've read obviously things that are related to it. And the first one I'm going to talk about is The Best of Mystery by Alfred Hitchcock. Now, the stories within this book are not by Alfred Hitchcock, but these are stories written by different authors and writers that were chosen specifically by Alfred Hitchcock to add to this book collection. So this was really intriguing. Again, I just browsed through the synopsis of what it was, and again, they're talking about different types of thrillers. There's like some murders, kidnappings, a lot of suspenseful and thrilling writings in this book too, and it is a chunker as well. I'm probably not gonna get to this book at any time, but again, this is one to really add to the bookshelf because again, it's really interesting. I obviously want to see what Alfred Hitchcock thought about this as well too. Again, if you're familiar with Hitchcock's work, he's a classic legend for thriller and horror suspense. The next book really caught my eye because again, the cover's bright and it's really interesting too because of the title, and that is Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. For those who don't know, again, I am a big horror fan, but I love mystery and puzzle and like crime solving. So Sherlock Holmes, again, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a legend himself. Again, this is a book that it's not told of obviously Sherlock Holmes tales, but it's told of different other tales that are related to, you know, the crimes that are like Sherlock Holmes and what he solves. The really interesting part about this book was I was going through, and it says too inside, but there are actually like illustrations as you go through. And let me find a good one in here. And as you're reading through, you find all these really graphic, you know, illustrations, as you can see like that. And then obviously the writing's on the other side. But I thought that was really cool. And I went through all this, and I do actually want to get to this at some point. So again, once I'm, you know, maybe at a bind where I can't find what I want to read next. And again, my TBR list goes on forever. But again, this is going to be one I do want to check out. Okay, earlier we talked about Stephen King, and now I'm going to talk about his son, Joe Hill. I've read a few of his books. I've read, from the top of my head, Heart-Shaped Box, Nosferatu, and Horns. So here's another one I've been meaning to get to, and a lot of people have read this, and it is Joe Hill's 20th Century Ghost. This book was actually kind of hidden underneath a pile too. Again, this is a small, not really thick book, so it's kind of hard to miss. So as I was going through these books and authors that I love to read, I actually got to add this to my collection too because I have not read this yet. I've been meaning to, so this is obviously going on the shelf, but it's also on my TBR as well. So let me know if you've read anything by Joe Hill. All right, the next two books, we're actually going back into Stephen King. Now, prior to finding these two books, I was only looking for Stephen King. I was going through the fiction piles, I was going through the mystery piles, which I really didn't know if he was going to be a mystery or not. But again, I was looking, I was searching, and I was kind of getting bummed down. I was finding other books to add, and which I'm going to talk about in my collection, but I couldn't find any Stephen King. But alas, I didn't give up, and I told my friend too, and she's like, just watch. I'm going to find it, and as soon as I find a Stephen King, I'm just going to go, yes! And soon enough, as I did that, I found my first Stephen King in this pile. This one was like a diamond in the rough because it was underneath. But the first one I'm going to talk to is Richard Bachman's Blaze. Now again, remember, Stephen King wrote under the pseudonym Richard Bachman in the early days. He wrote 7 Richard Bachman books. This actually being the last Richard Bachman book, and it is a great one. I go into details in my Stephen King tier list. This is Stephen King's rendition of Mice and Men. So really interesting twist, really interesting story all the way through, and I highly recommend it if you have not read Blaze or any of the other Richard Bachman books. Okay, the last Stephen King book I found, I've already had this in paperback because it is in the collection, which is the Dark Tower series. For those who love the Dark Tower series, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I found this one though. Now, I don't have any of the other Dark Tower series in hardcover, but I added this one to it because this is really good find and I couldn't just pass it up. And that is Stephen King's The Wind Through the Keyhole. Great cover, great condition. I could not pass this up whatsoever, no matter, even if I had the book on paperback on my shelf. Definitely wanted to add the hardcover to my collection. Another diamond in the rough find. I found this. I tapped my friend on her shoulder. I'm like, look what I found. I'm just so excited to find Stephen King, especially at this place where it was so hard to find Stephen King. I only found 2 hardcovers. All right, this next book I found was actually a really good one. I actually saw this book, like, not going to lie, I saw this 6 copies. And what I kept doing was I kept going down the line as I held this book. And as I found a new copy, I was trying to find the best copy of this book. And after searching for it, I found the best one I could. And that is Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. Now, I've seen the movies, obviously, with Tom Hanks, but again, I have not read The Da Vinci Code yet. Again, this is another book, if you don't know, if you've not heard of Dan Brown or The Da Vinci Code. Again, there's mystery to it. There's, puzzles, and like they have to solve them. And that's why I really love in certain books. If it's not horror, I love, solving puzzles. So this is a great one. Definitely, it is on my TBR list, along with all the other ones I've been talking about. So this is going to be a great one to get to, and I'm very excited to add to my bookshelf. These books are actually ones I'm going to get to recent because I'm starting, again, a new series I'm going to get to, and I have been talking about this with some friends. I've been talking about it too on my Instagram, and that is the Hannibal series, and I'm very excited. I recently just got the 4 paperbacks from a friend of mine. Shout out to Autumn for that. It was a nice book mail gift, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to get to it. It's actually on my bookshelf right here. Those 4 books right there. Those are the Thomas Harris books, and I can't wait to get it. But these 2 that I found are the ones that, again, I'm trying to read it in the chronological order of when it was published, but these 2 I cannot pass up. Again, this was another book like the Da Vinci Code that I found multiple times. So I was always just trying to find, the best copy, the best conditioned one. And that is book 3 in the Hannibal series, Hannibal itself. Again, great condition, hardcover, and I'm going to be really excited to actually get to these ones. Again, my paperbacks, they're the smaller version, but with these 2 hardcovers I have, which are actually going to be really interesting to have because I love reading hardcovers. I just love the texture of it, and that's just me. Maybe it's some other people too that like it, but again, to add it to my collection, I'm very excited about it. And then the last Hannibal book I got from it was actually the last book Harris published, which was in 2006, and that is Hannibal Rising. So again, this is actually obviously the childhood of Hannibal and who he became to be. It is the last book that was published, but you could actually read this last, or you could actually read this first in the series too. So it all depends, and I might actually just save this for last since it's, again, this is in the order of publication. So I'm probably gonna get to Red Dragon first, and then Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, and then Hannibal Rising. But again, another book. I found this a couple times too, so I found the best copy. Again, I couldn't pass up these nice hardcover books, so I definitely want to add it to my huge book haul. All right, everyone, we are down to the last 9 books in my book haul. The last 9 books are all from the same author. I've talked about him in the first part of this video, and that is Mr. Dean Koontz. Again, check out my video on Dean Koontz if you've not, because again, he's a little hit or miss with me. He's also a hit or miss with some people too. Most of these I have not read yet, but again, the big part of it is the series I'm going to be talking about. And that is, obviously, if you know about Dean Koontz, it is the Odd Thomas series. Now, as I was struggling through this book haul trying to find Stephen King, I was thinking about other authors like, Michael Crichton, which I found a few of his books, but I couldn't find Jurassic Park for some reason, which again, I'm kind of bummed about that. But then also Koontz was one of the ones I was trying to find out. And there's a lot of Koontz books in these piles. There were a lot of Dean Koontz books at the second place where all these books were. And again, I'm going to be talking about the ones that are in the Odd Thomas series. I did not find all of them. And again, my friend also helped me find some of them as well, and we're just going to be talking about the ones that I have found and then the ones I need to find. So again, I'm not going to spend too much on these. I'm just going to go through the list of the series. Again, me and my friend found books 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 in the series of the Odd Thomas. Now, there are actually 7 books. Now, there might be more than it, but I've looked at it, but there's actually like 7 in the whole series. So again, finding the majority of this Odd Thomas series was actually amazing. So again, book number 1 is Odd Thomas himself. The second book is Forever Odd. The third book, and I actually really like this cover a lot, it is Brother Odd. So again, the premise of all these books, again, are as a series, so I'm really interested in to see how this one's going to play out. And I've been meaning to read this series for a while, but again, just been holding it out on my TBR list. Book number 4 in the series is Odd Hours. Again, I don't have 5 or 7, but I do have 6, and that is Deeply Odd. All these Odd Thomas books I found in the piles, you know, searching underneath them. Some of them were on top. And again, it was just amazing to find these in such great shape. All of these books I found, again, 98% of it is all hardcover. They are in great condition. It's just amazing to me to find these, and again, to add to the collection for my Dean Koontz as well. Because I've read over 20 plus Dean Koontz books, and I'm going to start reading more of his books as I go on. All right, the last 4 of my books, everyone, again, Dean Koontz books. The 2 I'm going to talk about right now are ones I've read, and then the other 2 are ones that I have not read, but they seem to pique my interest. First one I'm going to talk about, I found it in great condition. This book is probably one of my top 5 favorite Dean Koontz books. Again, some people like it, some people don't. I like it because in this book, there's kind of like a music element to it, and again, music is a big part of my life, and that is Dean Koontz's The City. Great book. Again, amazing condition finding some of these. I'm so glad I found this in hardcover, and again, one of my favorite ones to read. The next one I read and I picked up, again, if you know Dean Koontz and if you read a lot of his books, you know that he's very close to his golden retrievers and his golden retriever dogs that he's had in the past. He likes to put golden retrievers into his story, and I find that's pretty cool. Again, man's best friend, you gotta love it. This one was The Darkest Evening of the Year. Again, this book has such a great cover to it. Love it. Great condition all the way through, like all my other ones I found. So another one to add by Dean Koontz to the collection. Again, my last 2 on the list. Thank you for everyone for sticking with me all the way through. Again, leave in the comments below if you've read any of these, or if you plan on reading any books by any of these authors that I've mentioned. The next book I picked up by Dean Koontz, the cover drew me in. I really enjoyed looking at it, and that is One Door Away from Heaven. Now, some of Dean Koontz books can be kind of preachy and kind of, you know, religious to it, and I don't mind that as long as it's not overwhelmingly too much into it. But again, this one, looked at the cover, I read the premise of the story, and I thought it sounded really good, so I wanted to add to it, and I'll definitely add to my TBR, and I'll get to it when I can. The last Dean Koontz book. This one I actually seen at my library every time when I was reading Dean Koontz, and again, I haven't gotten to it because when I was reading Dean Koontz, I just went through, like, not in order of publication like I did with Stephen King, but I did it in order, just of alphabetical order. So this one was obviously at the end of the order, and that is Your Heart Belongs to Me. Again, a very interesting cover. Kind of read, again, the synopsis of the story. Wanted to see what it was more about, so again, I just picked it up. And again, great condition all the way through. These hardcovers, especially finding them in great condition, is really hard to come by, so I had to snag them up. All right, everyone, that is it. That is my biggest book haul yet. And again, what a successful book haul. Again, leave in the comments below what you thought about this, anything you would like to share with me. Love reaching out to my subscribers and my viewers and talking about this. It's a blast, and I can't wait to talk more. And like I always say, my friends, please read your book cover to cover. We'll see y'all later.